So I wanted to take a moment here and focus on this front cover of Yahoo, where it is basically showing a number of developments here. And I'm just going to run through what is going on. And it seems like overnight, a lot instantly changes, and you notice the changes very quickly. And so, defenders of Roosevelt statue converge on Natural History Museum. And so, we are really at a crossroads. There's a real war going on here where people are more concerned about statues than people's lives. Now, we're still opening. There are some places, even though the numbers of coronavirus is skyrocketing, they're still opening, but they claim they're opening slowly. And then I hear some places that have opened are reclosing. So before I begin this video, I want to say that if you find any of this offensive, then don't watch the video. If you find that it goes against your political and your religious or your social views, or in your opinion you disagree with any of it, then don't watch the video, because I'm going to read articles, I'm going to make some assumptions and my opinion. And I know not everybody agrees on everything, but if you have those views that are oppositional, then, just as though you're entitled to your opinions and your views, I am also entitled to my opinions and views as the way I see from out of my lens. So let's make that clear. Basically, what I'm reading is an article out of the New York Times. It says, defenders of Roosevelt statue converge on Natural History Museum. And you can see the statue here. So a lot of the statues have been coming down, or they've been protesting. There have been protesters that have done homework on the statues and the origins of them, and a lot of them are very offensive symbolizations of a dominant class that has basically controlled for many decades, many years, people that are of color. And you can clearly see this from the depiction of the statue. Yet you have a dominant class that is trying to defend, to keep the statues up because of historical status, or the fact that it symbolizes their country. So out of New York, for more than a dozen years, Marion Reed, 77, had walked past the statue of Theodore Roosevelt on his way to work in information technology at the American Museum and Natural History of Natural History, an employer that he said often failed to treat African Americans with dignity. So he drove into Manhattan around noon on Sunday to photograph the statue before officials carried out plans to remove it from its place of pride at the museum's Central Park West entrance, only to find himself engulfed by about 150 protesters clamoring to preserve it. So these were protesters that wanted to preserve the statue. So among them were men in seersucker suits. So there are also women that were draped with pearls, people wearing MAGA hats, and others waving Blue Lives Matter flags while chanting "Save Teddy." Save our police, save law and order. About a dozen police were in the vicinity. So there was a lot going on that day. The protesters Sunday came to defy the nationwide movement that for decades has fought to bring down monuments that, like Roosevelt's statue, have been associated with racism, colonialism, and oppression. So we are fighting over the last will and testament of the United States. David Marcus, an organizer of the rally and a contributor to conservative website The Federalist, said through a megaphone. And so we are full-blooded brothers and sisters and heirs to the most extraordinary experiment in freedom that the world has ever known. God bless Teddy Roosevelt. And so the museum announced last week that the approval from the mayor and Roosevelt's family, it would remove the 80-year-old bronze statue. So they are, in fact, removing it. So the museum president, Ellen V. Futter, emphasized last week that the decision was not about Roosevelt, but about the statue itself, namely its hierarchical composition. So it features the president riding high on the horse, flanked by a Native American man and an African American man, depicting them, Mayor Bill de Blasio said, as subjugated and racially inferior. So speakers supporting the statue use the protest to rail against a broad range of issues, including abortion and religion. So one woman called for the removal of the feminists and the homosexuals from the city council. And so it got heated, sounds like. So a protester in her 70s who gave her name as Sharon said, "I don't see the statue as racist, and the word is overused and dramatized today." So she said the debate over the statue certainly has nothing to do with the police situation in Minneapolis where a man was murdered. She was referring to George Floyd, who died in police custody May the 25th. Even they see that it actually happened. So I'm adding that in there. So over the last few weeks, our museum community has been profoundly moved by the ever-widening movement for racial justice that has emerged after the real killing of George Floyd. So Futter said in an interview, "So we have watched as the attention of the world and the country has increasingly turned to statues as powerful and hurtful symbols of systemic racism." So the decision came as a pleasant surprise for the hundreds of activists who have demanded the monument's removal through an annual Columbus Day protest at the museum, which saw the statue splashed with red liquid in 2017. So this has been an ongoing battle to get this statue removed because of how it looks. So most protesters in the crowd were not wearing masks despite the global surge of COVID-19 cases. So worries about coronavirus pandemic had failed to dissuade Gavin Wax, 26 years of age, from planning a protest. So this is about much more than a statue. Wax, the president of the New York Young Republicans Club, said, "You can't judge pre-modern people by postmodern standards of morality, because at that rate you won't have a history." Whose history is it really? It sounds to me, and this is my opinion, that it's more about a white history being preserved than trying to get these symbols that symbolize people of color or people who are what they would say as being minority in subjugated positions. Because when you see these statues, it shows just that, or it shows the person who might have been the cause of a lot of bloodshed or a lot of pain and a lot of horror for people who were looked down on or looked at as slaves, or they were looked at as less than or inferior. So it goes on to say, for Reed of Westchester, the former museum employee who is black, the problem is a simple one. The statue is racist, he said. What I see here are Trumpites who want to return to a status quo. They want gone with the wind. The good old days when African Americans were kept in their place and racism was swept under the rug. So that's the article on this thing here having to do with these statues. So a lot of these statues are seen. You can clearly see you have the person that is the Indian to the left, and on the other side of Teddy Roosevelt is the African. And Roosevelt is sitting on a horse high above, and he is supposed to be the one in charge of the two people here, and whoever else is under them, is supposed to be lower than his class of people, and you can see that the way it's symbolized, and so that's very offensive, and they want that taken down. And speaking of offensive, it doesn't get any better. And I was looking at another article as well that coincides with that, and we're going to be back on this situation. So I seen out of USA, the Daily Beast, that Aunt Jemima's relatives want reparations. So Aunt Jemima's relatives want reparations, and that has come out in the Daily Beast. And so earlier this month, when Quaker Oats announced that Aunt Jemima would get a new name and logo, a 47-year-old truck driver named Larnell Evans Jr. received the news with some ambivalence. Evans is the great-great-grandson of Anna Short Harrington, one of the several actresses who played Aunt Jemima at fairs and in advertisements throughout the early 20th century. The company's rebrand and future $5 million donation rang hollow to him. And so that's the easy way for them to go, Evans tells the Daily Beast. I guess you would say that's saving money. So he had a different reckoning in mind. 6 years ago, Evans and his nephew, Denez Hunter, tried to confront Quaker Oats about their shared history in federal court. So in September of 2014, they filed a federal lawsuit against the Pepsi Company, the corporate owner of Quaker Oats, alleging that Harrington had helped develop Aunt Jemima's signature self-rising pancake mix, and the company had used her likeness as its logo without providing proper compensation. So they asked for $2 billion in relief and a share of the sales revenue. In Aunt Jemima, Quaker Oats still possesses one of the most recognizable and thus valuable trademarks in history. The complaint read, so defendants' actions epitomize what is the worst in corporate America, exemplifying the worst business practices anywhere on the planet. Quaker Oats did not respond to multiple requests for comment. So the legal saga spanned 5 years of filing, but collapsed after a Chicago judge dismissed the case and later barred Hunter from further filings without court approval. The loss hinged less on the content of their case, however, than its presentation. Throughout the dispute, Hunter and Evans represented themselves without an attorney, and Hunter drafted the motions. Evans proofread. Law was always a very interesting topic for both of us, Evans said, but we wish we'd hired a lawyer because they didn't take the case seriously. So while the documents often reflected a firm grasp of legal convention, Hunter at times slipped into first person and implied larger conspiracies, none too different from actual malicious sanctions the American government carried out against black people. Still, the documents' idiosyncrasies elicited snark from judicial authorities. At over 50,000 words, Hunter's complaint is longer than both The Great Gatsby and the King James Bible version of the book of Genesis. The dismissal of a subsequent filing in Minnesota reads, the overlong complaint meanders across a vast landscape pocked by conspiracy. Portions of the complaint are written in what appears to be Chinese. So a good deal of the original complaint, however, bears out in contemporaneous reports about Harrington's life and work. Born in 1897, Anna Short Harrington grew up in Marlboro County, South Carolina, and worked as a sharecropper on a cotton and tobacco plantation for several years. So in the 1920s, according to November 12, 1995, Newswire actually syndicated across the country, Harrington moved to Syracuse, New York, where she worked for several college fraternities. A skilled cook, Harrington earned a reputation at the frats for her pancakes, which soon spread around the campus and into the city. And so Harrington became the kind of local celebrity who appeared in regional news and at state fairs, preparing her sought after recipe for large crowds. It was at one such fair in 1935, according to the story of Aunt Jemima, a children's book from the South Carolina author John Troy McQueen, that the Quaker Oats Company recruited Harrington to play Aunt Jemima. The position took Harrington around the country to perform at store openings and other public events, according to her entry in the South Carolina Encyclopedia, a joint archival project from several universities. So by the time of her death, the entry reads, the former sharecropper owned 2 homes and lived in an area occupied by black elite Syracuse. So the black elite that were of Syracuse, and she had her own recipes, which was very unique, Evans said, but you didn't hear of people having their own recipes, especially working for Quaker Oats. So you would think working for Quaker Oats, whatever they hired them to do, that's what they would do. So, and she was promoting Quaker Oats products, but she was also promoting her own products. The lawsuit Evans and Hunter filed hinged on Aunt Jemima logo that Quaker Oats copyrighted 1936 and the year after she began working for them. So they claimed that the image was based on a rendering of Harrington's face as laid out in the contract signed by both parties. But Quaker Oats rejected the claim, arguing the character was fictitious and had never been based on a living person. So this is a line Quaker Oats has stuck to since at least 1948, and when they renewed the alleged Harrington trademark and added a note stating that the image did not depict a living person. And as recently as 2015, when historian Sherry Williams found the long missing grave of Nancy Green, the most famous Aunt Jemima, Quaker Oats refused to fund her gravestone. Their corporate response was that Nancy Green and Aunt Jemima aren't the same, and that Aunt Jemima is a fictitious character as well. Still, they were holding to that, Williams told WBEZ Chicago. So you see, this is what was on the boxes, and this was on the syrup all over. And so the precise term of Harrington's employment remained unclear before the lawsuit. Evans and Hunter requested Quaker Oats provide Harrington's contract for review. So in the emails submitted as evidence, Quaker claimed that they were actively searching for contracts that would pertain to Miss Anna Harrington, but could not locate any document negotiating her terms. So in the end, the Pepsi company filed to dismiss the case on three grounds: that the statute of limitations had lapsed, that their 15 claims either weren't recognized by law or weren't established with evidence or were implausible, and that the uncle and nephew lacked documentation providing their relationship or relation to Harrington on her estate. So Evans found it galling. So we had a family tree, and the death certificates, we have all of them. And so we have the obituaries, and there's no way that they can say, oh, they're not related. So the 47-year-old father said that I've always knew she played Aunt Jemima, and that's just a given fact. And so this was out of the Daily Beast. And this, if you have gone to the store and you bought pancake syrup or pancakes, this is the depiction that has gone on for years. And these are the actual people who were related to one of the women who played that character. So this is by our Tarpley hit out of the Daily Beast. And so there is a video that is attached to it, and so maybe I will play this so that you can hear what they have to say, so it doesn't sound like it's just coming from my mouth.
Is from a song titled Old Aunt Jemima, and that was from a minstrel.
Racial stereotype foods, many of which we all know, brands that we all grew up with. In this environment, it's time to finally say Aunt Jemima should no longer be the representation that we're seeing on our shelves. Uncle Ben also on there as well. Heidi Chung joins us now for the latest on the food space. And Heidi, again, I think we saw this news today, and you said, yeah, it's actually ridiculous that these brands are still out there in 2020. What changed just today? And I guess it's sort of like finally, but where did this, I guess, movement, and we've seen, again, multiple companies come out and say something today, where did this kind of come from?
Well, Miles, I think the power of the protests that we've seen across the country and across the world really over the past few weeks has really started to turn words into action when it comes to a lot of these companies. And we can't downplay the fact that this is a huge move. It's great news. All of that is nice, but it took over 130 years for Quaker Oats, which is now owned by PepsiCo since 2001, to finally say, hey, we're going to scrap this and we're going to admit that this brand was built on a racial stereotype. The Quaker Oates spokesperson saying in a statement that, quote, we recognize Aunt Jemima's origins are based on a racial stereotype. While work has been done over the years to update the brand in a manner intended to be appropriate and respectful, we realize those changes are not enough. Now, the Aunt Jemima that we see on packaging right now has evolved over the years, but the origin of the brand is from a song titled Old Aunt Jemima, and that was from a minstrel show performer, and it was also a song that reportedly was sung by slaves back in the day. Took over 130 years. You also mentioned Uncle Ben's Rice. Now that is all owned by Mars Inc. That company, just hours after we heard the announcement from Quaker Oats, came out and said, hey, we're also considering scrapping the branding that we have for Uncle Ben's Rice. We have no idea what it's going to look like, but we're also going to join the movement. So, Miles, I think a lot of this just comes down to the fact that it's been so long since a lot of these companies have actually started to take a look at their portfolios, take a look at their brands, and recognize that it's actually not okay to have this kind of racial stereotyping on these packaged goods. And I do also want to call out the fact that while Black Lives Matter has certainly been a very influential movement, we also have to recognize that companies like Chiquita, right? You see those stickers on the bananas, that is also racially stereotyping Latinos and Latinas. So I think that there's still a lot of work to be done here, but certainly a step in the right direction.
And guys, as Heidi mentioned, it took so long. And on balance, of course, it's great that these changes are happening, but it also is in many ways kind of blatantly disingenuous. I mean, why now? Well, because now they're all being reshamed, and now here we are. Now, finally, this appears to be the tipping point. We have reached the moment, and this is it, baby. And we're going to see all of the questionable mascots, logos, brand names maybe have a reckoning. We have arrived at the reckoning. And again, great. But at the same time, it's just kind of remarkable it took this long. And for some of these companies to come out and announce these things now, there's a little bit of that undertone of, well, now we've realized. I mean, it was always a problem. It's been a problem for decades or for even longer. There are just so many examples happening right now. I mean, the Oklahoma State football coach who wore a certain t-shirt, and then he did an apology video this week saying, once I learned what the news network that I wore a t-shirt of believes, oh, come on, you didn't know before? And then similarly, Lady Antebellum, a country group that I'm actually a big fan of, they have announced this week, we're dropping Antebellum from our band name, and we're going to go by Lady A because of what Antebellum represents. Well, it always represented that. And you knew that when you named the band that. But now, because the reckoning is happening, everyone is being forced into it. And one more note on this, I mean, you guys all remember a story that I covered very closely. I see this as part of the larger story that has been going on for 4 years of brands being forced into politics, being sort of shamed on social media, and a new reckoning coming where no longer are people standing for a middle-of-the-road, sit-on-the-fence PR statement. I mean, remember tiki torches had to respond when tiki torches were used in the Charlottesville March. Remember when the NFL first had the kneeling protests and all the NFL sponsors were asked, where do you stand on the protest? And they had to come out and comment. Now, of course, it's even more so. This is the real reckoning compared to 4 years ago, but it's all been happening for a few years now. And I just wonder, the next question is, will it hit sports? Will the Redskins be forced to finally do something? Will the Cleveland Indians be forced to finally make a change?
Well, I mean, the only thing though, Dan, is like I think the main difference between this and the examples you just outlined is these are massive consumer brands that have tons of research on what their consumers do and don't want. And it's obvious from the work they've done in the last couple of weeks that Aunt Jemima is now offensive to the majority of their potential consumers. And, Heidi, that's what this is about, right? There's obviously a climate in this country where people are now saying, this is wrong and I'm offended by this, as opposed to, I think, maybe the more cynical view of, oh, well, Aunt Jemima what Pepsi is backed into, changing this name. I think Pepsi said, actually, it's bad, and the research says it's bad, so we're going to make that change. It's not like people were sitting there necessarily and forcing this kind of change upon Pepsi. I think enough consumers said this is wrong, and we want this to end.
And Miles, just to that point, also we have to think about the time that we're in right now, right? Social media is such an impactful, influential force right now, and we've seen a lot of social media posts go viral calling out Aunt Jemima. And I don't know if you guys saw this last week, but The Onion had published something calling out Aunt Jemima, saying that they had rebranded it, calling it Sheila, who was this strong, powerful Black lady who went to Dartmouth and only eats pancakes sometimes. And so that was kind of a riff on that entire issue of the fact that Aunt Jemima is built on a racial stereotype. And I laughed at it at the time, but it made a lot of sense. And I think the timing of this announcement too is just very, it just speaks a lot to what is going on right now, but also the fact that the company is just essentially just being called out by all of these people that are refusing to purchase the goods at this point. So like you mentioned, people are just now saying, we're not going to buy it.
Yeah, and I think, again, it speaks to why, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many, I'm not breaking news here, this time is very different in terms of how consumers and how I think the general population views, the justice movement that's happening right now in this country versus, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, various things came up and it was seen as reactionary. I think this is very much, no, things are going to change. And while, again, the changing the name of Aunt Jemima pancake syrup isn't going to, kind of undo centuries of injustices, I think it's an acknowledgement that people say, okay, enough is enough, and we're going to go forward under a different framework here over the next several decades, and hopefully longer than that. All right, Heidi, John, thanks so much for joining. We will talk to you soon.
Quaker Oats is changing the Aunt Jemima pancake brand and logo. The cancellation of the brand, which is more than 130 years old, comes as an acknowledgement that its origins are based on a derogatory racial stereotype. The company says the name and image would be replaced on products and advertising by the fourth quarter of 2020. Quaker Oats did not say what the name would be changed to.
New Vicks Children's was built with the good stuff kids need for cold relief.
So there you have it. I just
And it's
wanted
free
you to
of some
see
artificial
that
stuff they
it
don't.
isn't something that's just coming from my words
Dump
alone.
the additives,
That
keep the
there is
relief
a movement
with New Vicks
around
Children's.
this
Aunt
branding
Jemima
of
has been the
foods.
name
People
and
didn't
face of a
even
pancake mix
realize,
and syrup for
and
more than
also
130 years.
people
But
who are
no
still
longer.
living
After
today that
facing
are
social media backlash
people
for
that were
being a
related
racist
to these people
caricature,
who played
Quaker
as
Foods, a
actors or
unit of snacks and
actresses
drinks
on
giant
these
PepsiCo,
brands of
announced
foods.
Wednesday it would
I
retire
guess
Aunt
people didn't
Jemima
even
for
think
good.
about that. But
The logo
what are
features
your
a black
thoughts and
woman named
feedback
after a
on
character
this?
from 19th century
So
minstrel shows.
this
The caricature is
has
rooted in a
been
racist stereotype of a friendly
part
black
of
woman working as a
what
servant
is
or a
known to
nanny for a
be the
white family.
reckoning.
She used to
And
be
it
decked out
is
in
not
attire
over
worn
with
during
yet.
slavery
There's going to
times,
be many
but got a
other
modern
things
makeover in recent
that
years.
are
Many,
going
however,
to
still
take
found
place
her
as well.
an offensive mascot.
So I'm
The
going to
decision
let
to
this
drop the
video
name and
go.
logo altogether comes
Like,
as
comment,
widespread
subscribe,
protests pour out into
and
the
thank
streets
you
over
for
racism in
listening.
the United States.